It's so important to work on your relationship with money, how you view it, how you spend it, and how you manage it. If you haven't tackled that, then believe it or not, no amount of additional income will make you better with money. A tweet by IKEA underscore is reposted by Pennies to Pound Pod. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Toy Talks podcast. My name is, of course, Toy Washington, and in this episode, I'm going to get naked financially. This is the financial nakedness episode as sponsored by Podcorn. Yes, guys, this is my first sponsored episode. Podcorn is a marketplace connecting podcasters to amazing podcast sponsorship opportunities, such as host read ads, interview segments, and topical discussions and more. With Podcorn, there is no middleman. Podcasters of all sizes can browse and choose opportunities right on their platform and collaborate with brands directly without any exclusivities. You never give up any rights to your podcast, and Podcorn is here to support you at every step and ensure that you are protected and compensated for the work that you do for brands. The marketplace mission is to give podcasters transparency, creative freedom, and full control of how you monetize. Check the summary that will accompany this episode, and I will leave all the information to Podcorn plus their website so that you, if you have a podcast, thinking of creating a podcast and interested in how to monetize your podcast, then Podcorn is a really, really good marketplace to do that. So thank you, Podcorn, for sponsoring this episode of the Toy Talks podcast. Girls, I be nervous and shit. I am hella nervous. And I think it's because I'm being financially naked with you guys, first and foremost. And, you know, I definitely feel within the Black community and amongst us Black women, we don't share. It's not something that we do. And we've explored that in various episodes of the podcast. But when talking about finances, I know as a community, a lot of us from different backgrounds, and I definitely know from my background and how I grew up, money wasn't something we spoke about, and it's definitely not something you speak about outside of the home. And I recognize that, you know, we all know what the platform is here for. The Toy Talks platform is to guide, advise, and teach and educate Black women how to navigate the world of work safely. So there's no way I could do that without talking about what comes out of work, i.e., none of us are working for free. And even if you are, it's so that you will be able to position yourself to be paid. But there is a financial nakedness that I've had to be to my partner, but more importantly to myself. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about my relationship with money, because what I'm hoping the output of this episode will be is that each and every one of you will evaluate your relationship with money, especially if you've grown up from a place of lack. What do I mean by a place of lack? You know, people talk about humble beginnings, but sometimes it's not about humble beginnings. I just find that is the white European way of being conservative of what the beginning looks like. And for a lot of us, the beginning is hard and the beginning is poverty. And if you hear me sound a bit nervous, it's literally because I knew that in delivering this, I would have to be vulnerable. And it's difficult to go back and remember situations where things were so hard, especially because from a mental health perspective, it did take its toll on me. But I completely understand that unless I'm willing to be vulnerable, I can't expect you guys to be. And ultimately, I center Black women all the time on this platform, and just generally, we are amazing. We are queens, but equally, we as Black women, there's a lot we have to deal with. And in addressing our relationship with money, it will require us to be vulnerable. And maybe it will open up conversations in your WhatsApp group chats. So I definitely understand the nuance of being a child of first generation immigrants. And my parents, like many of yours, came over to this country, the UK, for a better life, and to give myself and then my brothers an opportunity to kind of break the generational curses of poverty effectively. My first understanding of the strength of money came from not being able to go on certain school trips. I could go on all the free ones, of course, because they were free. But whenever money was involved, my parents tried their best, right? But I couldn't go on every trip. And the trips I did go on to, I didn't get any spending money. So I remember going to the British Museum. Now, when I went to the British Museum, I was so excited. I must have been about 8 when I went with school, and we went on the coach and everything. And effectively, it was. I don't think it was a paid trip. I think it was a free trip. I can't really remember, but it didn't occur to me to ask my parents for spending money. And I think subconsciously I knew it was because I was just so grateful to go on the trip. I didn't kind of want to push it with them. But equally, I think I had a understanding that that would require my mum and dad to make a sacrifice. And I remember going into the shop, I don't know if they still have it, in the British Museum, and they have these pencils. And if you know anything about me, I'm obsessed with stationery. I am absolutely obsessed with stationery, and even now I'm the same. I know quality stationery when I see it. And the British Museum have their branded stationery, pens, pencils, and I really, really wanted a pencil. And they did it in gold and silver, and they had the rubber at the top. And I was watching everyone, buy stuff and lining up. And I went to my teacher and I said to her, and her name was Miss Swats, or Swatter, or something like that. She was South African. And I said to her, I really want 2 pencils, but I didn't have it. I don't have any money. I didn't bring any money. I didn't ask my mum for money. And she says, well, Toy, if you haven't got no money, you can't get what you want. I'm so sorry. And I was so embarrassed because I had to stand by my teacher, and everyone got their stuff, and then we get on the coach and everyone's looking at their stuff, showing each other. And kids are mean, right? Toy, where's yours? Oh, I didn't want anything. And they just looked at me and they just started laughing. And I think in that moment I realized that in order to have certain things, you have to pay for it. And as a child, I didn't have money, and the person or the people that had that money was my parents. But the night before, the electricity went off because my parents couldn't afford to keep it on all night, and that was my reality. So my genesis of finances was lack, and I understood that I didn't have the things I needed. I didn't know I needed, because I felt like I had what I needed because I had everything. Do you understand? It's only when you start interacting with other people, and as a child, you go to school, you see what people wear and people talk about what they did on the weekend, that you realize that there is a difference, And I definitely think that my dad did try his best when it came to trying to teach me about money. But you have to remember, it's difficult to teach your child about money when money is associated with lack. So what are you teaching me? It's and my dad did really try. He tried to give me a nominal amount as an allowance, and I'm talking, it wasn't very much, like pounds, like 2-3 pounds. And it was just difficult. I just remember feeling different. Like every half term, kids would change their shoes and their shirts and stuff, and that wasn't my reality. You wash them, you iron them, fold them, put them away, and whatever wasn't ripped or broken, you would wear it throughout the year. And it would only be if your shoes were unrecognizable from the start of the year that we would get our shoes changed. But my parents worked really hard. Like my mum had 2 jobs, my dad worked really, really hard, and I didn't feel like I was missing out. But I was very conscious of the fact that money didn't come easy. There were sacrifices that had to be made, and those sacrifices came from money. And I associated money with fear. There would be knocks at the door, and my mum would tell us to be really quiet in the house. And as a kid, you're kind of nosy, right? And there would always be someone hovering around trying to look in and see if they could see anyone through the crack. So that in a nutshell was my reality and how I grew up. Now, at the age of 14, I knew that I wanted to work. I hated the idea of having to ask my parents for everything and being told no. So and sometimes the no never came with an explanation, right? It came with shouting or being told off, or definitely think that there were conversations that should have been had, and just a little bit of transparency, so that as a kid I could appreciate that things were difficult rather than feel like things were difficult or feel tense. And I definitely think that my parents didn't have the financial literacy to teach me, because they would be teaching me from a place of lack. So if I fast forward into my teens, and I'm talking like 16, 17, 18 here, I didn't have a good relationship with pay as you go. I never. I always had jobs, right? I started working when I was 15, but no one taught me about budgeting. No one really sat me down and made me understand where money comes from and why this money was so powerful and the importance of saving. I kind of figured it out, but figured it out really wrong, because then I went on to university, and Freshers Week, that offer credit cards and stuff. I got all of them credit cards, boy. I got all of them, and I saw it as free money. That's what I used to tell people. My stupid, infantile thinking. I would tell people it's free money, and I used to get store credit cards as well, or not credit cards, store cards. Sorry. So Topshop, and I love the fact that Topshop, Miss Selfridge and Dorothy Perkins and everything was a conglomerate of Arcadia Group. So I had this one store card, and I could go and I would proudly go there, and then I would repay the absolute minimum, and sometimes I'd just not pay it. Again, I would have summer jobs or work after school, at 15, 16, after college and things. But again, I was never really taught how to save. Having an overdraft, I saw the overdraft. I didn't understand that the overdraft doesn't belong to me. You have to pay it back. And actually, in paying it back is how you build credit. Like, I never got that. And there was no regulations. Like, it's different now. You've got the financial ombudsman and things like that. But there was no regulatory protection for young people when I was growing up. So I was finding myself in really difficult situations where my phone was getting cut off all the time. I went off to uni, and you get your student loan, and I would blow my student loan within a month. So I'd have to take up a part-time job. I was working at Topshop, funnily enough. So I was working for the company in which I had a store card. So effectively, I was working for Arcadia Group through Topshop, because every time I earned money, it would literally go onto my store card to pay whatever that minimum charge was. And then I had a phone bill. And actually, the responsibility of having those things, I think I was too young for. And I say phone bill, but I didn't actually get my phone contract until I was about, Toy, how old were you? Maybe 15, no, I couldn't have been 15. I must have been about 16, 17 when I got my first contract. And back then, the contracts weren't like it is now. It was like £25 a month or something. And then if you finished your allowance, then you'd have to top up with pay as you go. And then, so I had a very immature view of what money was. And I think my relationship with money became toxic when I left home at 21, and I had no business leaving home at that age. I was so young and so immature. I mean, I didn't believe that. I didn't know anything about council tax. I didn't know I had to pay council tax because I was 21, so I was considered young in my mind. But I wasn't young enough to move. So, and it was one of my friends that told me, she was like, yeah, you have to pay council tax. I was like, oh, but I'm 21. She was like, so, you have to pay it. And even with a council tax, because I didn't have that discipline of finances and understanding money and budgeting and things like that, I just didn't pay my council tax really. And oh God, I just wouldn't pay my council tax, and then they'd chase me, and then I'd work out an arrangement with them, and then the following year would come, and I'd find myself in a real perpetual cycle of owing. And then when you live on your own, you have more bills and more responsibilities, and you have to work to pay those bills. And I didn't have the opportunity then to go to my parents and say, can you help me out? Although I did now and again, but ultimately, I'd moved out of the home, and the details surrounding why I left home, maybe that's for another episode. But yeah, it was just way too young to move. And I will never forget the time when I went to work at the age of 21. I'd gone to work and I'd come home, and as I opened the door, there was somebody put something underneath my door, and instead of through the letterbox, because I had an external letterbox, and it was a bailiff that had come to my house and basically said that they'll be back. And I was paralyzed with fear, because I don't know about some of you, but my view of bailiffs is that they can break down your door, like all of that stuff. But it was the fact that I owed to a point where bailiffs had been instructed to collect their money or seize my goods in lieu of their money, or even just to sell my goods. And I didn't have anything of value anyway, but the things that I had is what I worked for. So you can see whereby there was now the creation of a circle of debt, bad management, mismanagement of money, and just having a very toxic relationship with money, associating money with and that comes ultimately from a place of lack. I definitely feel as though it wasn't until the age of 29 that, and remember, I'm 36. Now, I'm going to come back to that. When I was about 24, 25, still quite a bad relationship with money. But you've got to also remember, I'm now developing my career here, right? I'm working in certain places. So I've never not worked. You guys know this. I've told you guys, like, when one of my first jobs was as a cleaner, working in Tesco's, also Sainsbury's, working on the checkouts, also working as a cleaner in Tesco's. So, I wasn't shy of working. I even did handing out pizza leaflets. I wasn't shy of working. I wasn't work shy. I understood that I needed to work to gain. Now, it was never a question of what have you saved. I was living from hand to mouth, and I was paying debts. That was literally it. So I was almost terrified of ever being out of work, because I knew, and in a really weird way, my parents used to say, well, that will motivate you to work, but not motivate me in the right way, because rather than aspire for roles that would pay me more, I was just aspiring to get paid so that I could pay my bills. And that to me isn't very healthy, because there has to be a bigger picture in how you view money. What about saving? What about positioning yourself in a financial position or a career position to be able to aspire for more so that you can make more money? Understanding debt and how debt works and how credit companies work and credit card companies work, understanding Experian, Equifax, all the credit referencing agency, and how my decisions and how my relationship with money would have a domino effect into my adult life. Now, I was able to afford certain things, property and things like that, but best believe, that a lot of that came from when my parents started to develop themselves from a career perspective. My parents made certain sacrifices and allowed me to have certain things, but I had to pay them back. So again, it's that perpetual cycle of lack, and my parents not being necessarily fully transparent because they've had to borrow then. Do you understand? So it was borrow, borrow, borrow. And they depended on me to pay them back because they had to pay it back. Because, do you understand? So it was never good. It was never healthy. And I definitely feel like a lot of the places I've worked, like, for example, Goldman Sachs, I earned a lot of money at Goldman's. My bonus alone was a lot of money. But do you know, at the age of 36, I'm sitting here and I'm telling you, I've got nothing to show for it other than an entry on my CV, which looks amazing, may I add. But based on how long I was there and the amount of money I made there, what did I do with that money? Okay, yeah, property, all of that. But what did I do? Where did I put it? Like, did I save any of it? No, I didn't. Did I invest any of it? No, I didn't. I remember when I got my first salary from Goldman Sachs, it was so much money. And I told you guys this, right? That I called HR to let them know because I thought there had been a mistake. I wasn't emotionally equipped to deal with that much money. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have like a financial advisor. It wasn't like, do you understand? Like when the money landed in my bank account, a few weeks later, the bank called me trying to offer me credit cards and stuff. And I don't know if that still happens now because I don't get those calls. Um, but I was so bad. And talk about that. I was earning all this big money and I still had credit cards that I wasn't paying back. Like, so let's just say my take home a month was like £5 a month, for example. I should pay off that £500 credit card. No, I didn't. I was just paying the minimum because that's how what I'd been raised to do, like the minimum. Because I didn't, and I say raised to do because I wasn't taught anything else. I also want to talk about how money was weaponized when I was younger. And I say younger, and I'm talking like teens and stuff. And I would say that my mum was financially abusive. Get out of my house. No, you can't have. And I think that parents need to be really careful because sometimes kids, and well, I say kids, but young people are tipped because their parents, first of all, are not explaining certain things, but also as well, like the weaponization of money. And what is that really? It's power. And it wasn't until I started earning like enough money to be enough money that money shouldn't have been a problem, but money was always my problem because I couldn't manage it. And you know, I think there is a nuance of being the oldest. I'm the oldest child, and being a girl, the oldest girl. But I definitely felt like I was my mum was definitely that person who would threaten me, like if I don't give her this money or this is what she needs to pay her bills and I better give it to her. And I used to be terrified of my mum. Yeah, even when I moved out, I was terrified of her. Um, I have the mother and daughter masterclass on the toytalks.com website. And the reason I'm saying this is not, I'm not, at the end of the day, our parents are our parents. Like culture and religion are heavily ingrained and entrenched in some of our parents that change is difficult, especially when they refuse to do the introspective work or refuse to own up to some of their shortcomings. But I definitely felt like that was, it was fun. I definitely think that my father made really poor financial choices. And I say this to say that, again, he didn't have that financial literacy, and he didn't, he just didn't have, my dad had the potential that if he had the financial literacy, I think he would have made better financial decisions. So when it came to things like saving, how can you teach your child saving when you don't earn enough to be able to save? Do you understand? Because when you don't have, you're just trying to survive, isn't it? So if you're living from hand to mouth, you're not going to save because it is literally one hand, one mouth. I remember when I was working in a call center, I earned enough. Remember, I was working I earned enough, to pay my bills, not pay certain bills. So enough to pay some bills or not certain bills. So I didn't earn enough. Listen to the language I'm using here because that was my language that I used to speak to myself. And I earned just enough to be able to afford my transportation to work, there and back. So I wouldn't buy a monthly ticket. I'd literally there and back. So if there was a problem, like, I don't know, I lost my Oyster card, I was fucked because I had no money. And then a little bit of money to afford some food. And when I talk food, it would be like food that can last a long time, like tin food and stuff. There was a period of time working at that call center where I couldn't afford sanitary towels. So what I used to do is roll up toilet paper. I'd roll it up, and I'd get the cheap toilet paper, like the cheapest toilet paper I could get. So the Aldi's, the Lidl, or Tesco's, like cheap toilet roll. So it literally felt like tracing paper, and it was, aside from the fact that I didn't have good, vaginal literacy and understanding how to look after my vagina, that to one side, I was getting thrush weekly. Part of that was because of the tissue paper method, but I couldn't afford sanitary towels. And that was a really low point of my life. And finances were difficult for my parents. You know, my parents have gone through, I say my parents, but they had gone through a lot. And I was very aware of a lot of the things they were going through, because obviously my brothers would tell me. Yeah, it was hard. And I got to a point where I had to make a decision, because I was living from hand to mouth, and it was so bad that it was easier for me to sign on. Because if you sign on, I wouldn't have to pay my council tax then either. And I wasn't paying it now anyway, but the bailiffs were less likely to come and demand payment. They would take, if I was to sign on, they'd take it at source, but it'd be like £12. So I quit that job to sign on, because it was better for me financially to sign on than to work at a job where I couldn't afford anything. Now, I'm not sitting here saying signing on I could afford the world, but then at least I could get the cheapest sanitary towels. At least I could walk to the job centre as opposed to get on transportation. That was how poor I was. And again, like, I had a very fractured relationship with my mum, and it trickled down to my other relationships within the family. So it wasn't like I could be emotionally vulnerable with them and be financially naked and say, this is how bad things were. I'd maxed out my overdraft. I had nothing, you know. It was hard, man. And people will say, okay, but when you're working, if you wasn't earning that much, you could have applied for certain benefits. Okay, yeah. But you apply for those benefits, but you're not going to get that much, because, or if at all, because you're still working. Do you understand? And those benefits aren't that much. It's maybe an extra £50. But if you know that you're eating tinned salmon, maybe you'll upgrade now to be eating tuna. I don't know. And everything just felt really expensive. And on top of that, you know, my friends were, you know, they were working and stuff. Some of them still living at home, but they could afford to eat out or to meet up and go bowling and cinema. I couldn't afford to do that. Also, as well, as a Vaden TV license as well, because I sure as hell wasn't paying for that. And I would say those were my lowest moments. Signing on, you know, getting sacked from certain jobs in my early 20s because I didn't know how to navigate that fear again. Oh my God, how am I gonna, you know, pay my bill, you know? And one thing is as well, credit card companies don't care if you're not working and you're signing on, they still want their money. And they may take into account your financial predicament, but you still have to give them something. And again, I wasn't financially naked with myself. I wasn't honest with myself. And in order to enter into arrangement with credit card companies or store card companies, you have to be financially naked. And I found that too intrusive. I wasn't humble enough to understand that I'd placed myself in a position where I owe them. So they had every right to ask me those uncomfortable questions. So what I would do is they'd send, I laugh now, but it's not funny. And I'm trying to give you a holistic picture of where I was and where I am now. But they would send me letters, demand letters, and I knew what they looked like from the envelope. When you come from a place of like, it's very easy for you to start identifying letters where people want money from you. Or I say money from you, but where you owe them money and they're trying to recoup their money. And I'd post it back and I'd put a line through the address and I'd put on the envelope and I'd say, return to sender, addressee no longer lives here. I was doing that. And then they'll do tracer agents. Listen, if you come from a place of poverty, you get it. You understand it, isn't it? And also, the worst thing is, yeah, when I was growing up back in my 20s, whenever I was at my poorest point, there was always a guy that was interested in me, but I could never meet up with them, because if I met up with them, that means I'd have to get on the train. It was tough, man. So I'd only date guys that drove. Yeah, because if they drove, I wouldn't have to pay transport to get there. Do you understand? And they'd have to drop me home. Well, they wouldn't have to, but I'd bank on the fact that they would do that. And then you had the added issue of whether they're going to pay or not. So if I would go out, I wouldn't eat that much. I might have the cheapest thing on the menu, which would make them want to pay for it, because it wouldn't be any more expensive than their own food. I was very, very mad. But also as well, I used to act like, oh, I'm bad and bougie. Yeah, bad with money and bougie as hell, because I wasn't being honest with myself. I was bougie to myself. I know full well that if that guy walked out of that restaurant, how would I get home? I was wild. And this is why I say, well, I used to say, like, I don't believe, if you are broke, yeah, if you are broke to the level that we're discussing right now, I don't think you have any place to date, because number one, you have to kind of deal with that emotional and mental side of kind of standing up, right? But also as well, like, you're wanting to date and stuff, but you can't cover yourself, so why would you put yourself in that position to highlight that vulnerability? Like, why would you do that? So I I've learned pretty quickly that I can't date when I'm broke, because I'm gonna get rumbled, and part of being broke and being poor was that nobody else would know, and that would be me, that would be my rod to carry. And you know, even like, oh god, even to the point where um like, I don't know if you guys remember, or if if, I don't think it's keys anymore, I think it's the card now, but then it was the electric key, and I'd always be in emergency all the time. I was always an emergency. Listen, when electricity providers didn't even trust me to pay quarterly, that's when I knew things were bad. They didn't even trust me. They were like, no, we're coming in to install the key machine, we'll give you a key. I was always in emergency, and I was even owing on the emergency. Oh God, it was a perpetual cycle of just hardship. And I guess the question people would ask me is, well, you had your family there, why couldn't they help you? What, the same family that was also coming from a place of lack? I don't want to go into detail about my family, because that's their business as well. Like, I don't, this is more, about my journey, and I don't want to, but let it be known now that my parents did not have it easy. And when you have parents that are not financially literate, they're going to be making financially ridiculous decisions. And my parents were very obsessed with building houses back home. But your own house, the pipe in front of the house is broken, the water is overflowing, the toilet is overflowing. You understand? Like, I definitely believe that our parents, they had their idea of what money management was what it symbolized back home. So if you build a house back home, it's seen as, oh, you haven't lost who you are, even though you're overseas, etc., etc. And a lot of our parents, the court of public opinion is what's really important to them. Again, culture, religion, all those things play a part in our parents' understanding of finances. And if you come from a very poor background, your job is to break those generational curses. And it wasn't until, I'd say, my mid-20s that I realized that poverty was a generational curse, because everybody came from lack, and at some point I had to choose whether to continue that perpetual cycle, or whether I was going to work on me. And I'm going to be very transparent when I say this. I was working in certain places, but I was also unemployed at certain times. So if I was working in certain places, and okay, for example, there was one job that was paying me 16 grand, and then I made myself deliberately unemployed, i.e., I quit and I went to the job centre. Then my next job would take a few months, if at all. So then you have to deal with what you feel is shame going to the job centre. Do you know, I don't feel shame with the job centre, because I realise how much I pay in fucking tax. Do you understand? I realise how much I pay in tax. And I remember the first time I had to go and sign on, I had shoulders. And listen, I wanted them to know that this is a temporary measure. So I'll go with high shoulders, yeah. I will dress amazing, but I'll be sitting in the same seats like everybody else. The security guard will be treating me just like I'm everybody else. And sure enough, I would always feel scared that I would see somebody in there that I know. And also, I gave off this arrogant air, especially in my early 20s. So can you imagine, like, the psychology of knowing that I've got nowhere to go but the job centre, but I've got to dress up. I get there and I'm looking around like I'm looking there like I owe a loan shark money up and down, because I'm scared that someone's going to see me here going in and out. So I would go in, I'd wear sunglasses on the way there, and I go in, I take the sunglasses off when I'm leaving, I put the sunglasses back on. This is the madness I used to do. And the longest time I was signing on for was 9 months. Because initially I thought it was free, but I looked through all my emails, oh my God, to prepare for this episode. It was actually 9 months. And the worst part of it is, for me, was as I was signing on, like, you got to remember, I'd already done uni, and I would apply for certain roles and jobs and stuff, and they would basically say to me, if you don't find a job by a certain time, you have to go on so and so course. And I'm like, hang on, you're gonna send me on an IT course? I've just done my law degree. Do you understand? Like, I used to come with shoulders and chest and everything, and they just look at you like you're a piece of shit. And if the advisor doesn't like you, they'll make your life hard, because also as well, if they put in if they say you've got to do certain things and you don't do it, they'll stop your payments. So you are at their mercy, and there was a level of, I don't know, I just felt like hopeless. I felt useless. I felt stupid. I felt all the negative things. But on the other hand, I was watching other people finish uni and go on to certain jobs there, earning money. And I couldn't understand what was it about me. And I look back now and I think there was that nuance of being a black woman that played into job rejections, and it played into going into interviews and not knowing how to navigate and knowing how to do interviews. I had no clue. There was no such thing as a Toy Talks platform. No one had a platform where I could go and learn that information. Even if they had that information, I couldn't really afford internet, so I wasn't really seeing that either. Do you understand? It was just so bad. Now we're in the age of social media, internet's more affordable, Wi-Fi, everything. I'm not even gonna lie, there was a point where my internet got cut off, so I kind of tapped into my neighbour's Wi-Fi. Yeah, I did that for a while because it was open, they never had a password on it. That's how poor I was. So if they ever switched off that hub box, I'd be screwed. But that's it was so bad, when you don't know when you're gonna. It was horrible. And the thing is, I always wanted to work, and I will never forget the time. And this is before my Goldman Sachs days. I just didn't want to go to the job center anymore, and I just was being harassed by the security guard. He would harass me. He'd make me feel uncomfortable. But what was the alternative to not dress properly, or what I considered as dress and remind myself that this is temporary? Should I just dress like down, or so that I don't know. Anyway, and I was like, I'm not going to sign on anymore. So then back then, you at the back of the paper, you had like ads. They call them classified ads. So there was an ad in there if you wanted to be like a phone sex worker, like to do phone sex. And I called them and I was like, yeah, I want to do phone sex. And they were, oh God, I'll never forget this. I can't believe I'm sharing this, but I was so desperate. And anyway, so they said to me to put on like a nice seductive voice, and I couldn't do it. I just cut off the phone. I started crying. And I was crying because I couldn't do the sexy voice because I didn't feel sexy. And also because I knew I had to go and sign on in a few days, because really and truly, what was the alternative? I still had to eat. I remember when my washing machine broke down, and obviously, do you know how long it took me to get the washing machine I had? And I bought the washing machine second hand as well. So I got it from a charity shop, and the washing machine broke down, and I couldn't afford to wash my clothes at the dry cleaners. So what I would do is I would just save them, and I would sleep on the same pillowcases and bedspreads and quilt, sometimes 4 or 5 months, or until I got a next job. And that would be the first thing that I would buy, like bed sheets. It was bad when your underwear needs replacing, but you have to make it work because you've only got enough money to put on the electric, which is an emergency, eat something. And this is why I was so skinny. Let's be real. Yeah, my metabolism did play a lot into that, but let's honestly be real. I never really ate till I was full. I ate what I could afford, and it was a difficult time. And people probably say, oh, could you move back home? Believe me when I tell you that my relationship with my mum was so bad that I would have rather lived on the streets than to live at home. So I don't have a good relationship with money. Don't have a job. When I did have a job, there was no point in having that job because I was still in the same position. I didn't know how to save. I maxed out my overdraft, credit card, store card companies, not paying my council tax. It was bad. Remembering also, I didn't go straight to law school after uni. Like, there was at least 3, I'd say 2, 3, maybe even 4 years in between uni and law school, and even that was tempestuous to say the least. And I did share that in a previous episode. again, loans, credit cards to get through law school, working 2 jobs. Yeah, Jesus, yeah. When I look back and I think about it, I'm just like, wow, I've really lived a full life. But a lot of the fullness of that life comes from financial trauma and money being weaponized, not just by my parents but society. I mean, going in to sign on and them dictating the rules in which you will sign on. If you break those rules, they'll stop your money. That is a weaponization of money, and you know that this person needs this to survive, to eat, to possibly pay bills or adhere to arrangements, financial arrangements that have been made to pay for sanitary things, you know? Like, do you understand? Like, so the system even weaponizes money. I definitely feel as though, you know, I don't want to, you know, make this a 3-hour episode, but when things started changing was when, you know, I went to employment agencies and I was working through agencies, admin, you know, I did my cleaning job. You know, I was still living hand to mouth, but I started to realize that there had to be a lot of positioning in my life. And when I finished law school, I spent a considerable amount of time, you know, positioning myself for certain jobs, you know, not getting paid what I deserve, but getting paid more than what I had before, enough to at least sustain myself. I still wasn't saving. Again, it's the whole hand to mouth mentality. And then working here, working there, not holding jobs down. In my 20s, I couldn't hold a job down. And I say in my 20s, and I speak more in my earlier 20s, I couldn't hold a job down. Okay. So, you know, it was difficult. And then working in various different places, and then working at Goldman Sachs. And even before Goldman Sachs, I was at PwC actually, and then Goldman Sachs. And putting myself and positioning myself was really, really important. But again, you could position yourself, and it's, you know, I kind of said it in the opening tweet of the podcast, like, unless you understand money, unless you understand the value of it, how to save it, how to manage it, and having that financial education literacy that in schools that they don't teach, and I'm sure they don't teach it now, you could be earning 100k a year and still have nothing to show for it. And I'm trying to think about what the turning point was for me, and I think the turning point for me was the significant turning point was losing my dad. Because losing my dad, it hit me really hard, because I realised, I mean, for many different reasons, losing my dad hit me hard. But if we take the financial aspect and security, my father couldn't give me the financial security I needed, right? But at least I knew that if I needed £5, I could go to my dad to get £5, and that day I could have a piece of chicken and chips, or I could go home to get food because my dad would be there, right? So he would kind of keep my mum off my back type thing. But when he died, and I realised that I am on my own in every sense of the word, emotionally on my own, financially on my own, that support system had gone, I realised that I really am on my own, like really on my own. You know what I mean when I say really on your own, whereby you can't get that pound or that £5, you know, and luckily, I say luckily, but the ancestors took mercy on me, I would say, and I started to earn more money. I was earning more money but not saving. I was splurging, I was indulging, I wasn't managing my money. And when Kay came into my life, I would say that there was a turning point, because he's from a finance background. He works in finance, right? And I was so embarrassed that I'd have to be financially naked with him at some point, right? If this relationship was going to be long lasting, which now it is, but at that time I didn't know, I would have to be. And Kay, I was really honest with him, and insofar as saying to him that I didn't have any savings, and that yes, I was making money, I was making good money, but I didn't really have anything to show for it. But Kay did hold me accountable in insofar as he would say to me, you do realise that you've acquired a lot of stuff and you've been able to do that for various reasons, but you don't actually have anything to show of all these places you've worked for. So Kay held me accountable. He was my accountability partner. Now, I've skipped like a big section of my life here and I've just jumped to Kay. There are bits that happened before, but I mean, I'm just trying to condense things here. And maybe a Toy Talks Live, I may go into a bit more detail. But for the purposes of this episode, what I will say is I started to realise my financial capability. I was going into organisations and I was negotiating, but I still wasn't saving really. I mean, you can't save in your current account, right? So I would have money left over like I'd have money. I wouldn't have spent all my money, and I'd have money from a last paycheck, and then I'd get a new paycheck. But I would falsely believe in my mind that I'm saving in my current account, and that's not how it works. So then I decided, okay, I need to start paying some of these debts off, right? And every month it was a challenge. I challenged myself to pay a debt off, and I became debt free, and I am debt free now. And I think the fact that Kay and we want to spend the rest of our lives together, we have children, everything, that always motivated me to get financially healthy. Because what would be the point in being in a relationship with somebody who has a great relationship with money, or at least understands money really well? Okay. And that's where I lacked. So I was able to recognize where my shortcomings were. And I always said I wanted someone I could learn from. And Kay is very much that person. And paid all my debts off. I got to that point where I realized, right, you know what, I want a clean slate. Change my bank, savings account, everything. And I like nice things. I've always liked nice things. I've always aspired to have nice things, and I've always been now I think my relationship with money, I wouldn't say it's perfect, but what I will say is I hold myself accountable. I have a massive fear of credit cards, and APR doesn't stand for anything you want to purchase is ready for you. That's not what APR stands for. And I will say that when it comes to how I look at money now, I definitely feel like I've gone the other way, where I've become obsessed with never going back to where I started. So yes, I've got savings. I've got a healthy amount of savings. But every so often, I look at it and I think, I could blow this right now. I never would, but there's this thing, and again, it's from a place of lack. But I'd like to believe that to an extent, I have broken that generational curse, especially when it comes to pay brackets and stuff. I would say the whole idea my parents came to this country is to give me and my brothers a better life. So how am I going to show that better life? And I'm going to show that by not only acquiring assets, but investing well and making sure I save. Even when I went into contracting, I was absolutely terrified, right? Because I was conditioned to believe, like many of us, that you need a perm job, it's steady, it's safe. And then I started to review what safe meant and realised that no job is safe, redundancies and all that. And I would say contracting was probably one of the best things I ever did, because I took a risk and it paid off. And now, like, when I think about where I am financially versus where I came from, the fear of never going back to that state is one of the things that motivates me. But I do have an unhealthy obsession with avoiding poverty. And when I say avoiding poverty, I mean never going back there. So some of you may laugh at me when you follow me on Instagram or even on Snapchat and you see me in Costco and stuff, but I never thought I'd ever have a Costco card. I didn't think I'd be able to afford certain things in there. I will buy in bulk because I understand what it is to come from a place of lack. And actually, if I can buy in bulk and get a good deal, I'm gonna utilize that, because I was living from hand to mouth. You know, I never knew that there were so many different types of sanitary towels because I was only looking at particular ones that were within my financial bracket. Do you understand? And I definitely feel like I've gone the other way, and I have a fear. The biggest fear is that I haven't really broken that generational curse, and I'm still really bad with money. But I know I am good with money. I've made good investments. I've saved money. I've been able to set up my business and work for myself. And I'll never, ever, ever forget the time when I started contracting, and I'll never forget this. And it within my business account, there was £50,000 sitting in my business account. And don't get me wrong, I started to pay my taxes and everything. Let's not get excited. But seeing that figure just sitting there, I worked for that. I earned that. And I remember just crying because that is attainable. And I know for some people, they're like, what's 50K though? What's 50K though? But I earned that in 2 months. In 2 months. And I remember just showing Kay, and I remember taking a picture of it. I still got the picture. And that to me was like something that I know that my parents haven't been in that situation. Again, because of the financial generational curse that hadn't been broken, lack, not really understanding how to manage money. And I really doubt very much that if my dad was alive, that I would have gone on to be a contractor. I wouldn't have taken that risk. But I recognise that in order to get the reward, I had to take risk. And there was not many people around me that were contractors, to be honest. There weren't that many until I went into it. And then I started meeting people, and I started, I understood towards my late 20s that I'd have to put in a lot of work to have a better relationship with money. But equally, positioning was important, and how to position myself and how to do interviews, negotiation, all of that stuff. I developed that from a place of lack, and then from a place of wanting to position myself and be in a better financial position, understanding what success meant to me and how I was going to obtain that success. And also, everybody's got a different definition of success. And when I was struggling, people that I'd gone through education with or whatever, my peers, they were working, seemingly living life and enjoying life, making money. I was poor. I remember there was a quote unquote friend I had, and she knew I was struggling, I was signing on. She knew because I told her, and I swear to God, I will never forget this. She was working at a call centre, and I asked her if she could see if there's any jobs available. And because she didn't want me to meet her work friends or to take the shine off her, she didn't even ask. She just said, oh no, I don't think there's any jobs available. She didn't even ask the question. But then she would send me ASOS links to get clothes that she had in her wish basket. She'd send it to me. And she was like, I don't know if you're going to get this email, if your internet's still working, but I just want to show you this. And at that point, my internet was still operating. I was still paying a very reduced amount. The bandwidth was very low, but and that's not a friend. And it's funny how life is like swings and roundabouts, because we're in very different positions. Don't get me wrong, like she's doing okay for herself, but she constantly used to remind me, because I've kind of cut her off now, and I've cut her off because of other things, but also she's quite bad vibes. But she always used to remind me of, oh, look at you now. And I'm in my head, I'm like, what do you mean look at me now? I've walked through thorns to get here. Are you taking a piss? I'd say one of my biggest achievements was going into Audi showroom and paying for my car in cash. And that to me was the best feeling ever. And I didn't buy a car off the forecourt, by the way. There was one other driver that had driven my car, as in one previous owner. And being able to do that was one of my biggest achievements. And I say one of, because there's other achievements that I've achieved. But from a financial perspective, for me, that was confirmation that the generational curse of financial illiteracy had been eliminated. And I definitely think that the relationship with money, my relationship with money continues to go through an evolutionary growth, because I still think that society weaponizes money. I think that social media weaponizes money in the way it advertises money through people. I definitely think that the pandemic was a confirmation of people's financial standing. I'm going to say this, and this may be a little controversial, and I don't actually care if it is, because remember, I said that we're coming with our naked selves. Like, we're going to come with truth and authenticity here, vulnerability. If you have been remote working, listen to what I'm saying here. If you have been remote working, where typically you would have gotten the train during the pandemic to go to work, but now you are remote working, and you haven't saved anything, you have a very, very toxic relationship with money. Why do I say that? The money that you would have paid every month or every week for transport to get to work, you're working from home. So that money for transportation, you could have saved that every month because you're not spending it. So if you haven't done that, you need to now work on detoxing from the toxic relationship that you have with money, and understand that where that comes from, and start doing the work. And it comes from understanding that you now have to discipline yourself to put some respect on money. Last summer, during that pandemic, I never worked for 6 months because I didn't want to work. I was able to do that because I had saved up enough money and I had planned ahead that I wanted to take some time off. I just didn't know it would be 6 months. Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? There comes a point where you have to look yourself in the mirror and be introspective and do the work. Because if there is nothing that you have learned during this pandemic, is the fact that people have been financially vulnerable because organizations have laid people off, because organizations have been ruthless in dropping people out rather than using a lot of the schemes, example furlough schemes that the government had put in place to support workers. And I know furlough scheme was 80%, but you understand what I mean. Organizations don't owe you anything, so safety doesn't exist. It does not exist. The only safety that you can provide yourself is stability. Financial independence, I believe, comes from having a more healthier understanding of the power structures of money. And I'm not sitting here judging no one. What I'm saying is, if you haven't saved any money and you're remote working, and ordinarily you would have spent money to get to work, i.e. bus, train, whatever, and you haven't saved that money each month, you've got bad relationship with money. But you've got money to go on Pretty Little Things website and get a string vest, or to get some pom-pom shorts and batty riders. That don't make no... It's bullshit. Where was you wearing them clothes to? Your front room. It doesn't make no sense. If you want to test to see if you've got any financial discipline, it's to go look at your bank account and see what you saved. Now, I'm not talking about people who had to go into work and therefore were still attending an office or going to work or wherever it is that you work. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the people who are now remote working and therefore not traveling, because you would have had to spend that money on transport, and you didn't have to do that for over a year, and you haven't got any savings. You have to do the work. So that tells me that if you can't save that, even if you were to get a big job 2 times more than what you're earning, you still wouldn't save. Why would you if you couldn't save during a pandemic? I saved. I had no choice, because in my mind, I said, I've got financial goals, right? Number 1, I have certain aspirations of things that I want to get. My vision board, the things on my vision board, how I'm going to manifest them is through investment. You guys know, like, I'm really honest and transparent with you. I don't have big brands sponsoring me. This podcast is over 12 months old. This is my first sponsored podcast. Sponsored because you guys know that I'm very, very, very diligent about and very, very paranoid about what brands I associate myself with because I center black women. So brands that are not willing to center black women or don't, I can't work with you. So that means everything Toya Talks related is financially funded by me. I have to make sacrifices. And there was an episode I spoke about black women in luxury. I believe that luxury is obtainable for all of us if we understand how to navigate work, and if we repair our very damaged and often toxic relationship with money. So maybe someone's listening to this and thinking, so where do you start? Like, what's the starting point to mending your relationship with money? Pay a debt. Aim to pay a debt. And even if you're not in a financial position to pay that debt now, put that on your vision board so that you can hold yourself accountable. If you are unemployed, I'm going to say this to you. It's difficult. I've shared my story. And what I shared is the tip of the iceberg, by the way. No one is judging you. When you are financially able to get on your feet, you have to get on your feet first. You've got to stand up. You've got to make sure that you feed yourself, you sustain yourself before you start looking at. But it needs to be in your mind that when you become financially able, you need to start paying some of your debts. Because credit as well, and the information that's held at credit reference agencies affects you. Affects your ability to buy a house, get a mortgage, buy a house. It affects your ability to get credit. It affects your ability sometimes in jobs. If you're getting jobs working in the finance industry or where finance or finances are involved, they do a credit check. And if you have any CCJs on your credit, often you might have to explain that. And that can be very uncomfortable. That's a level of nakedness that maybe you're not ready for. But this is the domino effects to often our lack of knowledge about money. I genuinely think that if they taught financial health, understanding, give us that financial literacy from a young age, that would have at least been the start. Do you understand? It would have. And I'm not undermining the difficulty. You've heard some of the stuff I've gone through. But you guys are growing up in a different era. Those people that are my peers, they will testify to the fact that the access to information on the internet wasn't like how it is now on social media and everything. There is a toxic aspect to social media too, selling fantasy. You sell people fantasy and create people who are envious and who can't necessarily deal with the realities of what social media is, because in comparison that they feel that they don't compare, or everyone is doing now shoulders because is it June 30th or 31st or whatever the date is, everybody's now going rough and ready. Some people are still not in the financial position to be going out to eat out, drink and whatever else it is that people do. Everybody is going to Dubai. Some people, listen, I've never been to Dubai before, okay? I've never been there. They say comparison is the thief of joy, but when you have things like Instagram and things, it almost goes without saying that you will compare yourself. Listen, I've compared myself before. I do it all the time. You compare yourself, and it's healthy sometimes as a motivator, but sometimes you compare yourself. If you're already in a bad space mentally, you compare yourself. What is it that person has that I don't have? And it can be unhealthy when you fixate over it, and that now mentally breaks you down. But we are now in a position where we have access to information. That's the start. There are financial support bureaus and organizations that can help you with budgeting, that can help you with education in terms of money, that can give you advice. Those things exist, and it takes a Google search. Everything I've ever found out about, it took a Google search in terms of finances. Of course it did. And what I'm hoping to do through this podcast episode is to encourage you to take responsibility of your financial education. It's really, really important. And I'm not overlooking the increased unemployment rates. I'm not overlooking that, because I know that there is a nuance when it comes to that. So as part of me supporting you or anyone that needs it through listening to this episode, I would like to give 4 women access to any masterclass on my platform if you are unemployed or in a financial situation that doesn't allow you to access masterclasses on the platform, but you're ready, capable, able, wanting, passionate to get back into the world of work. So if you're unemployed or not in a financial position to be able to purchase a masterclass, I would like to gift 4 black women a masterclass of their choice. If I want to help you get back into work, I want to help you change your position by supporting you to position yourself to have access to a financial bracket that you thought was unobtainable. Listen, I don't have 2 heads. I've told you where I started. These are not new things to you because I said it. I've not done anything different or out of the ordinary. I just never stopped trying. I never stopped trying. And if I did, it was 1 or 2 days, a week. At best, a couple of weeks. I had to get back on because the world still goes round. And where I'm sitting now, in terms of my financial education, I still think that there is learning to do in terms of finances. I think the fear that I have of poverty, the fear of not being financially safe, comes from that place of lack or knowing where I started. But you know, a wise man once told me, if you forget where you started, you will end up back there. So sometimes there is a humbling aspect of remembering where you came from, but it's about not allowing it to paralyze you, and that's the bit where I need to get to. And in the same breath, I really work hard, and I'm able to say that with my chest. I work really, really hard. If you think about it, I work full time, just like a lot of you do, right? But also as well, I've got my businesses, and I'm full time doing that too. So the grind doesn't stop for me. And remember, like, a lot of the things that I've created, the platforms, everything is funded by me. Like when I had my Toy Talks live event, who do you think paid for that venue? I paid for everything. Everything. I've had to save, manage my money, sacrifice certain things to be able to afford. So let's not get it twisted because I work for myself and that I've got like a big pot of money somewhere, because I really do not. I just understand that in order to have something, I've had to make sacrifices. I've had to change my financial position by positioning myself, having the difficult negotiation conversations. And you've got to remember as well, I've given you all the tools. I have a website with masterclasses, CV masterclass. I don't care what no one says. There's no how you can follow everything in the CV masterclass, yeah, and not get an interview. There's no how. It's not possible. It's not possible. I'm telling you now with my chest, it's not possible. All the people that have bought my CV masterclass have testified to me. They've testified, and the ones that haven't testified are probably benefiting and have forgotten to remember me. No problem. No problem. There's no problem. Because I know that when I was pouring into the masterclasses, it's for your benefit. I don't need please or thank you. What I need you to do is use the tools to give you access into rooms where often we don't have access to. I want to open up our ability to achieve past this ceiling that they're trying to put on us. And I've given you like interview masterclass because I understand that your CV could be great, but your interviewing could be a shambles. And this is why your invite to interview doesn't turn into a job offer. And even at job offer stage, I've got another masterclass, negotiation masterclass, where I give you the tools to negotiate. Listen, there's nothing in those masterclasses that I've told you that I don't do. I do every last one of them. And this is why I'm here, because I've learned from a lot of my mistakes. I've learned the hard way. I've been in very, very toxic and difficult situations in the world of work, and I've learned from them, and I've created a platform to teach you guys so you can learn. Because as black women, we understand how the workplaces are constructed. We understand how the financial industry is constructed. I'm going to just leave you guys with this. On Sunday, I went to Mr. Class. Now, I was born and raised in Tottenham, so Mr. Class was part of my childhood, right? I've been going there since I was a kid, like I was a child. He knows me, he knows my family, he knows everybody. So I walked in there, and I figured that if I couldn't find it what I wanted here, I'll have to go to Superdrug. So obviously I'm in Tottenham, I don't want to have to go to Superdrug. So I went into Mr. Class and I found everything I wanted. I was so happy. So I paid for my stuff, and then I realised I forgot something. So I went to go and get the thing that I forgot. So I went to join the queue again. And as I was on my way back to join the queue, there was this man that walked in. His shoulders were so high, but his blazer was so tight. And he just had this air of arrogance, yeah? He had his sunglasses on. There was no sun, so I don't understand. But whatever, innit? You're doing Vim. He then coughed. Now, he went too close to me, but the cough was enough to scare us lot. In the shop, innit? Cause the last time I checked, we're still in a bloody global pandemic. So then Mr. Class was like, excuse me, you need to wear a mask. He said he left the mask in the car. So I was like, who cares if you left the mask in the car? You need to go and get it. We're in a pandemic. You can't be coming into people's shop maskless and then you're coughing. I said, it's just disrespectful to the people that are in the shop. So then he got very rude and disrespectful. And he was like, oh, do you know who I am? I've got 3 shops. You don't talk to a customer like this. Da-da-da-da-da. Listen, there were 6 women, 6 black, beautiful women in the shop. And we run him out the shop. We ran him out the shop. If you watch my Instagram stories, you would have seen. We run him out the shop. We weren't having it, because what you're not going to do, yeah, is weaponize your whiteness and your white privilege in the world of work and then come into our spaces, our black afro hair and beauty stores, to come and disrespect us. That's not fucking happening. Black owned, you're mad. So then, anyway, we ended up running him out the shop anyway. He got a nice little cussing. His wife come in as well, no mask. And I was like, yeah, you're married to this idiot, clearly. Or you're with this idiot, clearly. Where is your mask? And she quickly got her mask on because she got it. And it was like Mr. Class. And Mr. Class was like, listen, when he said he had 3 shops, Mr. Class was like, listen, if I was a white man, I'd be a billionaire with 6 shops. But because I'm a black man, I'm only allowed to have 1 business loan. And this is why I have 1 store and 1 barbershop. He goes, yeah, I can understand why you've got 3 shops, because you're a white man. So of course, that's the privilege that you get. But what you're not going to do is walk into my shop and tell me who you are, what you are in my own shop. Because if this was Sainsbury's, you would know to put on your mask, but you don't have enough respect for my business. That's why you think you can come here and command how you are being a customer, when clearly outside it says you have to wear a mask. So why is it you've walked into my shop to disrespect me? We weren't having it. We cussed that man out. We cussed him. I said, you that is telling us that you have 3 shops. Oh, you have 3 shops, but they're all closed, didn't it? Because they're non-essential. This one you're standing in that is black owned is open. It's essential. Your shop is non-essential. What does that tell you? I cussed that man out. We all cussed. We ran him out the blood clot. He had to come out of there. But the saddest part of it is understanding that the financial structure also doesn't benefit us in this country. So Mr. Class understands that, and he vocalizes that. He understands that his race, being a black man, has restricted him access of being able to evolve his business and expand his business. And that is sad. And when I walked back to the car, I was thinking in my head, so effectively, I have to resign myself to the fact that the reality is, if I want to expand this business of mine, it has to come from me. And it has to come from investment from my fellow black queens into my business to enable me to expand my business. Do you understand? So that goes to tell us the strength of the black pound. That if you want to create wealth amongst our community, we have to spend in our community. Do you understand? It's only when in our community we're trying to spend and we want something, but it's not available in our community, then we can look outside. I understand the strength of the black pound. There is also a responsibility that businesses have, that they don't give us subpar service because we are their brothers and sisters, but they will give better service to a white person or a non-black person. That can't run. And I do think that mentality, there has been a slight shift, although again, we have to educate ourselves and recondition ourselves because of the way society depicts black people and black businesses. There is a joy I feel when I invest into black businesses, and anyone that knows me knows I am actively and proactively investing in black businesses. I will buy black. I will tell people of black businesses. I promote black businesses. That's my thing. Equally, the service has to equate to the effort that we're making also to ensure that we center black businesses. So it is a relationship, but don't ever get it twisted. You can do anything you want to do. And whilst I understand a lot of us have our side businesses or side hustles, whatever you want to call it, the goal is financial freedom for me. The goal is to create a hub for black women to be able to come to and feel safe, take what they need to be successful, open the doors for fellow black women to come in and come up. That's my dream. That I could walk into organizations and see black female CEOs, black females in senior positions, having navigated, negotiated, articulated, and more importantly, been able to hold down roles that break barriers and ceilings. That's really my goal. So I will never, ever, ever stop using my platform and my voice to continue to pour into my community and to pour into my black queens, because that's what it has to be. I understand that to make a difference, I've had to call on all my experiences and create a platform to be able to share. And in doing that, I'm definitely seeing a change and a shift when black women access the platform and they're using it, and it's literally transforming their lives. It feeds into my soul. It feeds me. Because I understand that where I've opened a door for that woman, she's going to spread the word and open a door or teach people coming up after her to let others come in. And that's how it's done. That's how you build communities. That's how you break generational curses and community curses. That's how you do it. I want to read this message that I received recently, and I receive a lot of messages, and as much as possible I will try and read them. I definitely repost them. But this message really, this is what I mean about the next generation and also feeding into the current generation and our peers. Hi Toya, I hope you're doing well. I know this isn't the most appropriate time to message, but I had realised that your comments were open. I really wanted to share this information with you for a while. I had applied for 4-week paid summer placement at a top pharmacy company through my uni. I had used your tips from the Snapchat, your podcast that you share in regards to your CV, interview and cover letter. I wanted to tell you that I got in. Honestly, you don't understand how amazing your advice is, and most of all, how many people you have helped. Thank you for being you and creating such an amazing platform. I hope this year brings you so much happiness, joy and most of blessings. That to me is amazing. Now, this is somebody who's at the start of her career. That's someone at the start of their career. And you have some of us who are a bit more seasoned, but maybe just not navigating in the right way. Use the platform, use the podcast. There are so many different episodes that relate to the world of work, where I share where I fell down and should have done things differently, or how I've been successful at doing things. And I have been very transparent about the difficulties of navigating work. And as we're doing this episode and we're talking about, financial nakedness, I've allowed myself to be financially naked with you. Can you be financially naked with yourself? What changes do you need to make? What do you need to address in your unhealthy relationship with money? What is it about money that has allowed you to disrespect it so much that you would rather spend money on getting frivolous things than paying that credit card, or increasing your credit card repayments by an extra £10 or £20 so it's not just the bare minimum? What is it about your relationship with money that you are so terrified about investing that you would rather invest in Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Prada, Balenciaga, Yves Saint Laurent? What is it? What is it about money and the negative things that we've learned from our parents and relatives that's placed us in a situation whereby we should be financially comfortable or financially healthy, but we just choose not to be? What is it about money that you do not respect? That when you look in your savings account, you couldn't even afford a bag of rice when you know you should afford at least 4 or 5 bags of rice? What is it about your financial predicament that you know that you need to improve, but you're scared to? And what that improvement requires is positioning, maybe negotiating better, applying for a more senior role, or having those open dialogue conversations about money. Got the negotiation masterclass there on the toytalks.com website. What is it that is preventing you from opening that door and having that conversation with yourself? What is it? These are the difficult questions that you need to answer to be able to go on the path of obtaining, sustaining a healthier relationship with money. It is a journey. It is a what? It is a journey. And what happens on that journey is we become students of life. And when you are a student, you are opening your heart and your mind to learn, because you know that you're not the finished article and that there's something to learn to better yourself. We have to choose to do better, be better, and aim for better. Aim for more. We are allowed to have more. When you come up from a place of lack, it doesn't mean you have to remain in lack. You should want to break the generational curses that have plagued us because our parents were in survival mode. There are so many different outlets, platforms. I mentioned when in the opening of this episode, the tweet that was retweeted by Pennies to Pound Pod. That Pennies to Pound podcast is created and delivered by a Black queen. There are platforms that are there. Now, don't get me twisted. I understand that there's people that are not in a financial position to save, and I get that. But again, it is also, you are also in a position whereby you may have to take a risk. Some of us are. You could take a risk and want more money and apply for more. Don't allow society to dictate the perimeters in which Black women operate when it comes to success. Financial success, career success, family success, life success. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to draw this episode to a close, and this is part 1. There is going to be a part 2, and that part 2 is financial education, financial literacy, and that will be coming up in next week's episode, and I'm really excited, and I can't wait to deliver that episode to you. It's going to be brilliant. Please make sure I have something special for you for next week's episode. So I'm really, really excited to deliver that to you. There is something very humbling, very cathartic, and very freeing with being financially naked. As you know, this episode of the Toy Talks podcast, Financial Nakedness, is sponsored by Podcorn. I would like to give a huge thank you to our podcast sponsor, Podcorn, for sponsoring this episode of the Toy Talks podcast, Financial Nakedness. If you have a podcast, thinking of creating a podcast, please explore the sponsorship opportunities and start monetizing your podcast by signing up to www.podcorn.com/podcasters. If you want to follow me on social media, then you know my personal Instagram page is Toya_Washington. The Toya Talks podcast Instagram page is Toya_Talks. If you want to follow me on Clubhouse, it's Toya Washington, all one word. And of course, I have my Clubhouse room, which is called Toya Talks. Make sure you give us a follow. If you want to follow me on Twitter, the hashtag is Toya Talks. My handle is Toya_W. And of course, if you want to follow me on Snapchat, it's Toya Washington, all one word. I want to thank you guys for joining me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. And more importantly, I'm going to see you next week for another brand new episode of the Toya Talks podcast. My name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toya Talks podcast.